In America, there are about 67 motorcycle crash-related fatalities for every 100,000 registered bikes. By comparison, in Italy, that number is just 7 per 100,000. And in Japan, it's under 5. That raises some questions, doesn't it? We have fewer riders per capita than almost any other motorcycling country on Earth, yet our fatality rate is nearly 10 times higher than theirs. And not just developing countries where small 125s are the norm. Countries like Italy and Japan, too. The places where all of the amazing, powerful race championship winning motorcycles originally come from. Something doesn't add up. How can a nation that romanticizes the open road, that literally built the world's biggest highway system, one that treats motorcycling like a symbol of freedom and rebellion, how can we be objectively so terrible at it? It's not that Americans don't love motorcycles. We certainly do. We love buying the biggest and baddest models, modifying them to our heart's content, and then arguing incessantly about them on Reddit and Discord. But as a riding culture, we're just kind of bad at this. Today, we're gonna figure out why. One of the core issues for American riders is that most acknowledge motorcycles as expensive toys, not as a viable form of sensible daily transportation. Here in America, they're luxury goods, status symbols, or an outlet for the occasional weekend dopamine hit. To me, they're not too dissimilar from jet skis for a lot of people, just a toy they don't think about too much. Floats in the overall power sports umbrella. For most, they're not viewed as a legitimate and routine means to get where you need to go. When you ask an American why they bought a bike, they'll say, well, I always wanted one, and once I started earning enough money to qualify for the loan, I picked one up. You don't normally hear, it's better on gas, shortens my commute, takes up less space, and puts less strain on the roads. Meanwhile, in Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, or India, the motorcycle is the family SUV. In Vietnam, there are over 65 million motorcycles for 100 million people. In the US, it's 8.6 million bikes for 330 million people. In Italy, scooters outnumber compact cars in some cities. In Brazil, the best-selling bike is the Honda CG160, a simple 162cc commuter that gets 130 miles per gallon. And in America, our best sellers are the Harley-Davidson Street Glide, the Road Glide, and the Ultra Limited. Big, stonking 900-pound touring barges that cost more than a new Civic and barely gets 30 miles per gallon. In America, the average new motorcycle costs $14,000 and travels fewer than 3,000 miles per year. That's not transportation, that's recreation. And as far as recreation goes, motorcycling is a pretty poor value proposition. Because we see bikes as toys, they're not supported in a way that incentivizes real-world riding. Lane filtering is still illegal in 90% of the country, much to my chagrin. There are no motorcycle tax incentives, no universal parking infrastructure or advantages. Sure, motorcycles can park for free in downtown Austin, here where I live, but you're still gonna get pulled over if you filter through stop-and-go traffic when it's 105 degrees out. Ask me how I know. If you ride to work in the US, you're probably an outlier, and depending on what online motorcycle communities you interact with, you might also be the diversity hire. Contrast that with London or Barcelona, where you can park for free on the sidewalk and lane filter through traffic legally. Here in the US, you get a ticket or a lecture about how the motor officer who pulled you over doesn't make the rules, he just enforces them. Oh wait, is this supposed to be the freedom-loving country? I forgot. In these countries where motorcycles are in varying capacities at the forefront of transportation, there are systems in place that incentivize riding, making it much more convenient, accessible, and safe. Motorcycling never became mainstream transportation here because the cities just aren't built for it, and as a result, our culture just doesn't value it very much. It's a catch-22. Americans don't ride for transportation because it's inconvenient, and it's inconvenient because they don't ride. The next glaring problem is how Americans learn to ride, or rather, how they don't learn to ride. In the US, you can take a weekend MSF course, get a neat little certification that is good for one free motorcycle endorsement on your license, and then you can go down to the dealership and finance a brand new leader bike at 30% APR. Now that's freedom, baby. There's no tiered licensing system like there is in Europe, where you're required to start on a smaller bike before graduating to a higher power limit based on age, experience, and completed training, and a combination of the three. Beyond the courses put on by the MSF, here in the States, there isn't even widely discussed or accessible training for intermediate or advanced riders looking to continue their education. Those that do exist, like the Yamaha Champ School or California Superbike School, have limitations that prevent them from achieving widespread adoption. First of all, they're very track and sport bike focused. Many Americans don't ride sport bikes, and only a small minority ride on track. So even though they have ample room to improve their skills, they assume it's not really applicable to their riding in the real world. Secondly, they're only in specific areas of the country. If you only ride your bike a couple of times a year in the warmer half of the year, why would you travel to another state that's thousands of miles away and pay a bunch of money to learn about the traction limits of your tires? You probably won't. Not only that, these courses are extremely expensive too. In the UK or in European countries like Germany, training is quite a bit more costly and rigorous, but the payoff is real skill. European riders will understand cornering physics and advanced braking techniques before they're even allowed to legally look at a 600. In the US, you can finance an 1800cc cruiser for 86 months, even though you've only ridden a Grom in a parking lot for 8 hours total. Or you can buy a Gixxer 600 on Marketplace with no endorsement or insurance, a suspended driver's license to match as well, because it's the land of the free, baby, home of the brave. The average American rider is a middle-aged guy with a big cruiser, bad riding habits, and a questionable drinking problem. Or a younger rider with a fast bike, a TikTok account, and more bravery than skill. You can either crawl through a corner with a bagger or yeet yourself into a guardrail on a Gixxer. There's an alarmingly small number of riders who land somewhere in between. There's no lack of courage for American riders, but there is definitely a system that lacks mandated skill and controlled progression. The data just simply backs it up. You can hate me all you want for saying that, but it's true. Big bikes with small brains equals more crashes and deaths. Rigorous training doesn't discourage riders, it grows them from the ground up. America's freedom first, education second attitude is why we can't have nice things. Here in America, we also have an issue with how motorcycles are perceived. We take flack from the police, the Karens on the Nextdoor app, or the Ram driver with the white Oakleys and a goatee who calls you a homophobic slur for filtering. Motorcyclists are far from beloved in our culture. In the States, people think motorcycles are for outlaws or for idiots or both. You're either some wannabe tough guy on a Harley or a brain-rotted sport bike squid doing 186 miles per hour on the freeway. At least that's how they're perceived. The public image of motorcycling is so warped that for most non-riders, it's a mix between a brain-dead death wish and a performative midlife crisis. Movies, TV shows, celebrity endorsements have just solidified this perception. We can all look to the classic Wild Ones or Easy Rider and be like, okay, that's not really what motorcycling is like nowadays, right? But even modern portrayals in action movies like James Bond or Top Gun depict motorcycles incorrectly. Jumping a dual sport from a bridge onto a moving train is as inaccurate of a representation of motorcycling as riding an H2 on an airstrip at sunset with no helmet while grinning like a maniacal Scientologist. Honda tried to fix this in the 60s with the NICE campaign, moving the public image of two-wheel transportation away from outlaw biker gangs to a family-friendly lifestyle. It worked for a while, and it certainly aided in Honda's global dominance. But now, 60 years later, the public image has reset to degens and squids. There's no acceptable middle ground for sensible citizens who just enjoy riding on two wheels. And this matters because perception drives policy. When lawmakers see bikes as dangerous toys that are ruining the peace and quiet afforded to homeowners and property owners, when reckless riders abuse societal resources by needing to be airlifted from the canyons every weekend, they're probably not going to quickly advocate for laws that change in favor of motorcyclists.
If you've ever tried filming your own rides while out on the bike, you know it can be a pain. switching mounting points, swapping batteries, juggling 5 different cameras and microphones just to get one good shot. But with the new DJI Osmo 360, that chaos is over. This thing is your one camera solution for motorcycle content. Helmet shots, handlebar shots, full 360 panoramas, it does it all, instantly. In panoramic mode, you can shoot gorgeous 8K at 50 frames per second or drop to 6K 60 for buttery smooth action. Do you need slow-mo? I'll do 4K at 100 FPS. You can even snap full 120 megapixel 360 shots, or flip into single lens mode and run it like a normal action camera with 4K 120 ultra-wide boost mode with a crazy 170 degree field of view, or 5K 60 for cinematic flat video. The best part? You can switch between the front and rear lenses on the fly without ever stopping the recording. It's like having 2 cameras in one. No retakes, no fiddling with mounts, and because it's part of DJI's ecosystem, it plays perfectly with the Mic Mini and all of your other DJI gear and accessories. Everything just works really intuitively together. So whether you're filming your morning commute or a full-blown track day, the Osmo 360 keeps it simple, seamless, and seriously professional. Hit the link in the description to grab yours and simplify your whole setup with the DJI Osmo 360.
A lot of you 20-year-olds might not know this, but Americans used to dominate motorcycle racing. We had King Kenny Roberts, Eddie Lawson, Wayne Rainey, Kevin Schwantz, a whole cast of absolute legends in the 80s and 90s. Then came Nicky Hayden, our last great MotoGP world champion in 2006. Rest in peace. Since then, it's been crickets on the world racing stage. The MotoGP grid is filled with Euro boys, dudes from Italy, Spain, France. They tend to dominate. America's premier racing series are things like King of the Baggers, where Harleys and Indians scrape floorboards around Laguna Seca. Fun to watch? Sure, for some, but competitive with MotoGP? Not even a little. We've shifted from technical racing to novelty spectacles because the industry knows what sells here: noise and nostalgia. Bagger racing feels more spiritually akin to a monster truck rally than a serious sporting endeavor. No offense to bagger racing fans, that's just my opinion. For many manufacturers, racing drives innovation. Conversely, series like King of the Baggers sells t-shirts. When you look at Europe or Japan, racing is seen as an art form, an intersection of technology and skill. In America, it's a niche within a niche, a hobby for the most elite of diehard enthusiasts. Dummies like me, people who love motorcycling too much and just want to go as fast as possible. The American motorcycle industry is bleak. While we've never had the prowess of Japanese or European manufacturers, American companies at least used to have relevancy. It was bigger Harley-Davidsons that forced makers like Honda to expand their manufacturing horizons, and that's how we ultimately ended up with revolutionary machines like the CB750 or the Goldwing. Beyond HD, the US once had a vibrant motorcycle manufacturing scene. Brands like Buell, Victory, Indian in its original form, and a bunch of other smaller boutique builders. Now Buell is trying to claw its way back from the dead for the third time with recycled EBR platforms. Victory was killed off by Polaris years ago, and Indian was just recently sold to a private equity firm whose portfolio includes Los Angeles cafes and a hot sauce brand, which leads us to believe that the brand might soon be stripped for parts as soon as 2027. Harley-Davidson survives as a lifestyle brand, not what you'd think of as a ultra-innovative motorcycle company. They make good bikes now and then, and they prove that when they want to do cool stuff, they still can, with the Pan America being a solid effort. But they're still decades behind the rest of the world in many ways. And we can see this with their bleak finances and consistent boardroom drama. Maybe the new Pizza Hut CEO guy can breathe some new life into the motor company, but as it stands, it is really depressing the way in which Harley represents American motorcycles. And despite the criticism, like a third or more of motorcycles sold in the US are Harleys, so they kind of just dominate the home market. So what they do and how they operate affects the riding culture here, no matter how much we 2/3 of normal motorcyclists dislike it. Compare that to Europe, where Ducati, Triumph, BMW, and KTM are consistently putting out high-performance, technologically advanced motorcycles that are just generally exciting. Triumph and KTM are both heavily invested in entry-level machines as well, with BMW soon to enter the lightweight ADV segment themselves, something that American companies like Harley or Indian refuse to invest in. And of course, the Japanese companies are unstoppable. Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki make everything from flagship sport bikes, exciting middleweight twins, supercharged monsters, or utilitarian mini bikes. The dedication to progress these companies show is emblematic of the sort of inarguably superior motorcycle culture from their countries of origin. In the US, most domestic innovation is focused on chrome accessories and cup holders. Like I alluded to, Harley-Davidson sales are down nearly 40% from their mid-2000s peak. The average buyer is now over 50 years old. That is not a growth industry, that's a retirement plan. We fell behind because our industry catered to nostalgia instead of new riders or exciting machines for decades. And when the average rider is aging out without an investment in the future, the whole culture starts to dwindle and kind of fall apart. I think this phenomenon is most apparent when you look at a company like Janus in America, where we collectively have said that the ignorance and incompetence of a manufacturer making old-timey bikes is equivalent to the cutting-edge progress that we see around the world. We can do better, and we probably should do better. Did you guys forget we put people on the moon? Come on! All right, so we're not that great at riding, racing, and marketing motorcycles here, but is it hopeless? How do we stop being the punchline of global motorcycling? Normalizing small bikes is a good start. In more specialized communities, we already know this, but the general American audience has not quite caught on yet. We need to ditch the big bike equals real man mindset. A 400cc machine is enough for 95% of riders in 95% of situations. A middleweight bike making around 120 horsepower is enough for even experienced riders to have all the fun they could ever dream of on the street. European riders prove this every day on 125s that see 20 times the mileage of an average American's 1000cc superbike garage queen. Secondly, rider education has got to be better, whether that's through a tiered licensing system or even just incentivized advanced rider training. You gotta reward competence, build the incentive structures to make it cool. Make skill cool again. American motorcycle culture has a massive uphill battle if even a small fraction of new riders get scared, hurt, or killed just a year into their riding career when they leveled up to a leader bike after 4 months on a Ninja 400. And you might think that's crazy, but I see it all the time. I think with more rider training, we'd not only see less fatalities, but just generally increased longevity among riders. The public perception also needs to change. HD needs to stop selling rebellion and instead just start selling a reality. You can ride a motorcycle and be a normal guy or girl. It doesn't need to be a cringe lifestyle choice or be your whole brand identity or whatever the hell. Whether that is being a Harley pirate or a TikTok ghost rider or whatever, brands, creators, and riders need to uphold a self-respecting public image that represents a realistic approach to motorcycling. Just because you ride a bike doesn't mean it has to be your whole life. You don't have to be this thing all the time. Look, this isn't meant to be a particularly controversial opinion. America's a great place to own a motorcycle. We have a humongous, diverse landscape with great riding and a deep cultural history of motorcycling over the last 100 years. Seriously, if you're the type of guy that leaves comments saying that, oh, America's all just flat, straight highways, just take a look at Google Maps. Look how big our country is. Go to the East Coast, go to the West Coast, look at all the places in California, Oregon, the West Coast. Dude, there's so much good riding here. But as you just noticed, we also have a bit of an ego problem. We think freedom means doing things our way, even when our way kills us 10 times faster than any other country. Motorcycling here will never look like it does in Europe or Asia. We can certainly learn a thing or two from other places where motorcycles are more seamlessly integrated into the culture. I want to see more riders, better riders, and a more respectful public image. An image with a little bit more dignity, let's say. But what do you guys think? Can we be better at motorcycling, or is this topic too political and at risk of alienating my audience? Well, I guess it's too late anyways. We're already at the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.